Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Bree. I live in Kansas Zone 6B, and today I'm going to give you a tour of my garden for the final time in the 2023 season. We are in our final month before our first average frost, so I have cool other crops in here that will stay after that day, but I also have a lot of stuff in here that is on its final stretch, especially my trellis tunnel. There's a lot of things in here that are no longer, and this is mostly just loofah at this point, but honestly, there is not a lot going on in the garden. I typically start these tours with saying we have so much to talk about. There's so much going on, but in reality, we are really starting to dwindle down here, and things are really starting to slow down. I've been pulling stuff. You'll see there's a few empty areas where things just were not thriving, so I ripped them out. I wasn't going to strip more nutrients out of the soil when I'm going to be planting that with garlic here pretty soon. I'll be planting garlic in 6 weeks, and then that will be the final thing in the garden. So yeah, we are really in that final window, which I honestly can't believe, but you may be able to see in the corner here, I did get my final blooms that I was hoping for. They're small. The sunflowers definitely aren't as tall as they were in the summertime, but I definitely still got a second wave of sunflower blooms, which makes me really happy. So let's go ahead though and talk about the trellis. The trellis is definitely the highlight of the garden at this point. It's full, it's beautiful, it's so magical, and that's why I wanted to go ahead and start here today, because honestly everything kind of goes downhill from here. This is mostly just loofah at this point. I harvested all of my honey nut squashes last week. I have 2 more cantaloupes on the vine. I have a few little watermelons, 1 random cucumber, and the rest of this is loofah. I guess I still have 1, 2, 3. I still have 3 squashes on the vine. I left those as kind of an experiment. So with the squashes, I actually had some cracking going on. So this was something I didn't deal with the year before, but what ended up happening was we got extremely hot in August, like I just mentioned, and the area where this trellis is planted is just a 1-foot strip box that we planted, and it can get pretty dry. So of course, we're having stretches of over 100, 108, 107, like super high hundreds, where the soil was just getting really dry. So I go through and I really wanted to deep water that way, like everything was good to go. Well, I learned that when the squashes are in their final stages of ripening and that skin hasn't fully cured yet, you risk them cracking. So I ended up thinking, I think I had like 6, maybe 7 of them crack on me, and it was some of my really good sized one, and we all know how much I have struggled with squash bugs this year, so that was a little devastating over the last month, but I still got a really good harvest, so I'm really happy about that. I still have those 3 on the vine, and they are actually doing good. That was an experiment because we got a bunch of rain last week. We got an inch of rain, and I was like, I need to harvest these, and a lot of them were ready to go, but I was really just nervous that I was gonna have cracking, and I did have 1 crack, but luckily enough it was the small little baby. But really, yeah, there's not much going on. We have a ton of loofah, of course. So we have a few more that are starting to dry out. I'm going to have to probably harvest a good amount of these green again. I think I'm going to experiment with laying them out and drying them a little bit more. Last year when I did that, I don't think I probably had the best airflow, and I have my curing station in the garage. So I might try to dry them out. We'll see. I don't know. I'm gonna have to process a good amount of them green again, and that's just not fun. It's a lot more work. I prefer them to dry on the vine, but here, being in 6B, our length is just good enough where we do get a good amount of loofah. Like I've already gotten, I think 14 or 15 of these dry on my trellis now, and I have a few more that are already, they're really starting to go. And once they hit this point where they start to yellow, they dry out like this within about a week. And there's probably, I say I probably might get like 15 to 20 more that are going to dry out on the plant, but the rest I'm gonna have to harvest green. I have a few videos of how I did it last year, but it is difficult. But you get more of a white loofah, and these are more of like a linen, like naturally color. I really don't mind the color, but that's just kind of the gist on that. But the trellis is my favorite part of the garden during this time of year, because honestly, everything else is just kind of blah. And this thing loves to just thrive, and it's magical, and it's just my favorite part. So this is what I mean by crazy, whimsical mess. There is stuff that looks partially dead, but yet the trellis over here is full as well. We've had some really hot August weather, and that the last 2 years I feel has played a really big part in a few things. At this point, I have kind of just let my zinnias go. I deadheaded them a good amount a few weeks back, but now anything that's deadheaded, I'm just going to leave for birds. I've had some hummingbirds come around with the zinnias and butterflies and all that. So even though they don't look the greatest, they're doing really good things for the pollinators. So I'm going to leave them until frost comes and knocks them out. Even though they don't look that great, I'm fine with it. I'd rather just let them do what they want to do. But this is another one of those areas that isn't doing much for me. I didn't have a lot of my green beans pop up because of that heat. These pods I have didn't really pop up. I am going to get a second wave though of jalapenos, which makes me really happy. I also keep forgetting about this Goldie Honey Bear sunflower that is just chilling over here. Again, I'm just letting it go for the birds. So this was one of my second waves of jalapenos that I planted, and these plants really didn't start to thrive until the last few weeks, and they started to put on a good amount of peppers. I mean, I'm not really like that great, but I'll still get a second wave because a lot of my other peppers, they're doing pretty good. I'm getting a lot more serranos turning red. I do want to do some fermented batches of peppers to make hot sauce here probably in the next week or so. But my other jalapenos, I'm getting some red ones on there. I wanted them to get red so I could make more of a sriracha, but I don't know if I'm gonna have enough of those. You can see we have a lot more flowers popping up on the tomatoes, and they really started to rebound, and that's typically what happens. They start to rebound and then they run out of time. One thing I do want to note with my peppers this year is this was the first time I moved them over to this space, and this is one of my sunnier spots. So when we got that extreme heat wave and then on top of that extreme sun, on top of the heat wave, it was just really hot and sunny in this area. I had a lot of peppers get ruined to sun scald. I had a lot of my bell peppers. I had a good amount of paprikas have that happen too, and also my cayennes. So one thing I might need to do next year is actually try to figure out some type of system with shade cloth, but I'm not exactly sure how I'm gonna go about that yet, because that would really help. But I also could move them to another area. I don't know, we'll see. But I did have issues with sun scald over the last month that took out a good amount of peppers. I'm still having a good amount of peppers though. So I can't really complain, but bell peppers are one of those things that started off really strong and they started to clunk out early on me, unfortunately. So I still got some things to figure out with bell peppers. I think my one issue was when we got into that extreme heat wave, I probably should have fed my peppers then. I think I got off on my timing when it came to feeding my peppers a little bit. So a note for next year. One thing I really want to do better next year that I did better this year, but sometimes my brain just doesn't help me. During that busy peak part of summer when harvest is coming in every day and you have a million and one things to do, like that is when I need to set a reminder on my phone to make sure that if anything needs to be fed in the garden, I do that. Because like I said, that timing was just a little bit off. And I feel like they may have powered through that heat stretch a little bit better if they were feeling their best, right? Like that's kind of how we feel. So I try to take that same approach with plants. And yeah, so it's just one of those things that I really do need to start journaling a little better. I do a really good job of documenting as far as video goes, but I need to write out a list of when I fed certain plants to where I know when they might need fed again. Because one thing is my soil isn't new. So unless I am topping with compost, I really do need to keep amending beds. So it is one of those things. I do plan to probably do another soil test again. I did a soil test at the beginning of this year, and I swear that was a complete game changer with how things did. Because I had a really good year. Despite a few things. So this is where some of my germination got spotty during the heat of August, especially with carrots. Carrots don't like heat when it comes to trying to germinate. So I do have some spotty areas in here, unfortunately, but it's whatever. Here's my other round of carrots. These are probably just going to continue to live in the ground. I might harvest a few and maybe try to preserve them, but carrots do really well if you leave them once it gets cold. The ground kind of acts as insulation, And as long as you're not having like super hard freezes, you can just come grab a carrot whenever you want. One of my favorite things about growing carrots. So I must have had actually a few older carrots, because I did plant carrots over here last year, stay in the ground, and now they're going to seed. So I'm just gonna let this carrot go to seed. Look how beautiful. So crazy. They start off like this. This sunflower's on its last little leg. It probably needs to be tossed here pretty soon. I was waiting for seeds. Here we go. We got some seeds in there, so I'm gonna probably go give this to the chickens. I'm really shocked a bird hasn't got that yet. So over here, I also have some kale on both sides. I have some more green bean plants. We have some lettuce. So it's crazy to point out about this lettuce here in the little areas versus this lettuce. So I have lettuce planted in between my broccoli. All of this lettuce was planted at the same time, but you can see the lettuce over here is significantly smaller. It's because this trellis really shades out that interior. They really just started to pick up in size this week, so that's really interesting to note. So this area gets a lot more sun, and I did have 2 of my lettuce plants bolt on me, but other than that, they did really well. I have some more lettuce in the basement I've been considering planting out, but I planted that lettuce for just basement use, just so I could have lettuce throughout the winter months. That is something to note, and it's something I'm trying to be better about this year, is using my seed starting lights during these like into fall winter months to have things like microgreens, lettuce, spinach. I'm also about to order a bunch of wheatgrass to do fodder for chickens. I want to have a fodder system in my basement where they can get constant grass throughout the winter months. Like every other day, every few days, and constantly have that going. I just need to get the seeds ordered. Also, the cats love the grass. I typically grow grass for them in the winter because I bring them out. They like munch on some grass in the garden. But I really want to get a full-on fodder system continuously going to where all of my animals have access to grass when they want it, any time of year. And then I can also use that wheatgrass as well and do wheatgrass shots. So I'm really trying to get away from buying any type of greens at the store, since I do have lights, and I can have those lights going year round, even during peak summer when things might try to bolt and stuff like that. So I'm just trying to get better about using the stuff I have and trying to buy less of what I don't need, because for some reason a head of lettuce organic went up to $4 a head, and that, I feel like that's just really crazy, because I can buy like a few hundred seeds for $4. Okay, so let's talk green beans. I have 3 beds of green beans here, and the last 2 years I think I've just timed my green beans out during that window where we just get too hot. So here is my little thought. So previously to the previous 2 years, oh my gosh, I would plant my beans out in spring, but the last 2 years I've waited to plant beans until like midsummer in July, once I get like my onions and garlic harvested, because they typically are a shorter crop. You can get away with planting them within a 55 to 60 day window. But I have found that since they have shallow roots, and then if the soil dries out really fast, even if you're on top of your watering, I feel like if you don't have irrigation, green beans can be kind of tricky to grow midsummer. I don't know. I've had issues the last few years once we got really hot, and again, just flowers dropping and them not really producing. Out of my 3 beds that I've had planted since June and July, I have only gotten like maybe a cup, 2 cups worth of green beans. It's been really sad. So I have been considering using my trellis tunnel next year, doing an entire bean tunnel, doing a bunch of pole bean varieties, so they all trellis up. I don't really need to grow loofah again, probably. I probably have enough loofahs. I don't plan to probably gift as much as I did last year. I gifted almost all of them away last year, but I plan to just kind of keep them. Since I am limited space, again, I have to try to start prioritizing certain things I want to grow. So I think this would work out really, really well as a pole bean area, and it just be full of beans, but I don't have a lot of experience. I typically plant a bunch of bush beans, and as you can see, they take up a lot of space. So if you have your favorite pole bean varieties for greens, I like green beans. Your favorite green bean pole varieties, I think was it like Kentucky something? I don't know. But let me know your favorite varieties because I'm considering making this a bean trellis next year. I don't know. I love loofah so much and it's like one of my favorite things to grow. So I don't know. That's really challenging to kind of figure out. But I will say hands down, one thing. Everything pretty much did well this year, minus green beans. Green beans have been an extreme disappointment. Did just harvest all of my white sage last week. So if you're curious about how I made a bunch of sage bundles. So go check that out if you're curious. I have loved growing this. So white sage is not a perennial in my area. It's a perennial, I think, in zone 9 and 10. I do plan to take this inside and throw it underneath my lights as well. It smells absolutely amazing. So I want to try to keep this plant going as long as I can. I found it pretty easy to grow. So really happy. I love smudge sticks. They're like one of my favorites. So I have 28 broccoli planted in these 3 beds and they are doing really well. So even with our stretch over 100 degrees, these plants did good. I was kind of worried that they were going to potentially bolt with that heat, but this variety is called the Bell Star. It's a hybrid from Johnny's. I grew it in the spring and had a very similar experience where it's supposed to be more stress resistant to like just stress environmental things. And this has done really, really well for me. So I'm hoping that we get some good broccoli here in the fall season. The plants are doing really well. I have had some issues with caterpillars, but I've just been picking them off. Nothing too crazy. The plants rebound really fast. But yeah, I just have some lettuce and broccoli here. And that's like it for those 3 beds. But yeah, the broccoli's been doing really well and I've been really liking this Bell Star variety. It's been a really good performer for me this year and it did really well in the spring. So again, it's been doing well in the fall so far. So I'm hoping it continues to do well. This is one of those areas that will stay after we get our first frost. So broccoli and lettuce, these will do well for a while. Anything that if we get like a hard frost, I will cover them. So as we approach the cooler season, once we start dipping into frost dates often, I will be covering a lot of this area along with the broccoli and the lettuce. So I have hog like fencing that I cut for these rows when we originally made this in-ground space here. And we also have a bunch of solar plastic. So that will keep us going into the season, hopefully into December, January. Last December, we had a stretch where we had feel likes in the negative 30s and 40s. So I'm really hoping we don't get that cold again because that was really hard to also deal with the chickens when it got that cold. That is some extreme cold and that will just knock pretty much anything out. So that's the plan for that. Just some season extension, hopefully get us through December is typically when I still have stuff going in the garden. And then in January, we start starting with onions, which is just crazy. So when I first started gardening, especially being in 6B, I really thought gardening was more seasonal than it truly has become for me. It's more of a year-round thing. I do get a pretty good break through November to January. I really have not much going on. I'm not planting anything. Everything is pretty much planted at that point. And if I have stuff planted, I'm just kind of monitoring it. I'll be curious to see how that goes this year with me trying to want to establish that fodder system, like I said. But sowing grass and throwing it under lights is really easy and it takes like 5 seconds. So not really worried about that, but that's the plan for that. So I actually have some Swiss chard planted in this first row, which I've never grown Swiss chard before, but I'm really excited about it. I've had a few people be like, yeah, I'm shocked you never tried to grow it. I had no idea. So I actually have one more new variety this year. I have Swiss chard I'm growing. I also have some beets, pak choi, bok choy. I have some kale, which my kale did not germinate well, and neither did my spinach, unfortunately. So I don't know if I really have had any spinach pop up. That was another thing I had some issues with germinating. So I'm just gonna put spinach downstairs. It's quick, it does really well under light, so I'm not worried about that. But I have a good amount of bok choy, kale, baby greens, beets. I want to freeze dry the beets, make a beet powder. I have a lot of these baby greens and kale in the garden for the chickens. And yeah, I'm just excited. I'm really upset about this one strip, this second one here. I had a bunch of beautiful pak choi planted, and I've never grown pak choi before, and it looked amazing. And the next day I was gonna come out and thin it, but we got a bunch of rain, and then roly-polies decided that that was the only area they wanted to mess with, so they ended up getting pretty much all of it. I don't know if any of it's salvageable or if it will continue to grow at all. So I finally got my elderberry plants planted, and they are definitely a lot happier being planted and not in their nursery pots. I probably let them go far too long in their nursery pots, because when we got that extreme heat, they also weren't liking it. So they are all budding back up, and that makes me really happy to see them starting to thrive again. I have my other one over here in this corner. So elderberry can get 8 to 10 feet tall and wide. I'm hoping that we're not here that long where this one will get that big, but my intention is to take my elderberry plants with me. So this is Instant Karma. You can see it has this beautiful variegated leaf on it. And again, it's starting to do really well now that it is fully planted in its own little area. So I do have a few tomatoes over here, and you can see where they were getting really knocked around with some blight, but you can see they really started to thrive and rebound. So tons of flowers, they are starting to bud up, but honestly, I think this is just going to be one of those situations where everything is just a little too late, unfortunately, because these plants didn't really have an opportunity to thrive either. So I planted these out, I think, beginning of July, and they started to get going right as that heat started to knock us out. So as my 6th year as a gardener comes to a close, it's been really cool to see how much this year truly felt just great. I had a really balanced year, amazing harvest. I felt really comfortable in my decision making and being able to just succession sowing and know and how to manage my harvest, how to preserve that harvest for later. Overall, year 6 has definitely been one of my favorite years, despite some things not going fully as I wanted them. This year was truly an amazing year. I will probably make a video here in the next month or two, sometime once things slow down even more, talking about the ups and downs, things I'll do differently, things that thrive, just kind of the whole recap on the gardening year in detail, so look out for that. But either way, guys, this is going to conclude the final garden tour of 2023. Thank you so much for being here and experiencing this year's garden with me. I'll see you guys all in the next video. Bye.